channel. Happy 2018. I hope you guys had a great holiday, whatever holiday you personally celebrated. I am so sorry that I was gone for a lot longer than expected. Things changed. A couple of my plans just kind of like combined themselves and everything just worked out so perfectly. We'll get more into that in a second. I have a huge exciting announcement coming in this video right now. I know some people hate when I ramble in the beginnings of my videos, so I'm gonna go ahead and leave a timestamp right up here of when the actual case starts. But what I'm going to say and my exciting announcement actually will directly benefit this case, and it will directly benefit Saturday's case. So if you are interested in helping in more ways than just watching and hearing these people's stories, then sit down and buckle in because I've got something exciting to say. So I've been planning for a while to do something really large for when I hit 100,000 subscribers. I had a pretty big idea set in stone. I was really excited. I was going to have subscribers in on the video. However, something pretty large happened that prevented this idea from coming to life, at least for right now. So it's a new year. It's 2018. My channel is about to hit 100,000 amazing subscribers. January also happens to be Human Trafficking Prevention Month. I had the case of Ebby Steppach on my list for such a long time now. You guys have been suggesting this video and this girl over and over again. One of the largest theories in this case, again before I get into it, is possibly sex trafficking. And being January and Human Trafficking Prevention Month, I figured it was a great thing to start off the year with. So I know a lot of this probably isn't going together and making much sense. What does human trafficking have to do with hitting 100,000 subscribers and this and that? I knew for my 100,000 subscribers, I wanted to not make a big video about me succeeding, if that makes sense, and like, oh, I did this. I wanted to really dedicate something to the parents. That was my original plan for the video idea. I wanted to dedicate a video to show these parents how 100,000 people care about their children. 100,000 people care about their loved ones. 100,000 people spend over an hour a week learning these stories and retweeting my tweets and sharing my videos and liking my Facebook page, not for me, but to help bring their loved one home. So I came up with the idea to release some limited edition merch. And I know you guys have been asking for this for a very long time, but this is going to be a little bit different. I will only have this merch available for 6 days. I think next Tuesday at midnight is when it will end. I will go ahead and put a picture in of it right here. I feel like it encompasses me, it encompasses all of you guys, and it also supports the people that I talk about on a weekly basis. I felt like the design just hit every single thing that's important to me when it comes to this channel, when it comes to covering these cases. So every bit of profit off of all of these items that you guys, hopefully, I'm not sure how it's gonna go, purchase will be split in half and given to the GoFundMe accounts of the 2 separate cases that I will be talking about this week. Half of it will go to Ebby Steppach's GoFundMe account. They are desperately trying to up the reward in hopes that someone comes forward. And my case for Saturday is on Elijah Moore and Enrique Rios. They also are desperately trying to get a GoFundMe going to support investigation efforts and reward money. So I figured what better way to start off the year than by showing these people that we care. And not only we care, but almost 100,000 of us care. You guys amaze me constantly with your support and with your love for not just my channel, but for the people that we talk about. You guys are so incredibly respectful and caring, and you really go out of your way to make sure you help share this information that I share onto you guys. So I'm not sure how this is gonna go. I don't know if anyone's even gonna buy any of this, but either way, something is better than nothing, and I plan on buying a shirt, so if only my profit goes to these GoFundMes, then so be it. If you don't want my merch, if you don't want to spend that money on it, if you just want to go to the GoFundMe pages, I will link both of them down below in this video and on Saturday's video, if you would rather just go directly to the GoFundMe. However, I thought it would be kind of cool to incorporate something interesting, and I figured the shirt was vague enough to start conversations with people while you're out wearing it. So I hope you guys are excited as I am. I've been planning this for a while now, and it was a bunch of separate pieces that just fell together perfectly to create one great way to start the new year. So I hope you guys are excited. The link to the shop will be down below where you can purchase these items. I also have permanent merch coming out in the near future, but that is still a little bit on hold. So don't be upset if you wanted something and you can't get it this time around. I will have more merch coming, and part of the proceeds of that as well will go to different cases and different foundations. So there we go. Now to move on to today's case, which is the case of Ebby Jane Steppach. Ebby was an 18-year-old senior from Little Rock, Arkansas when she went missing on October 24th, 2015. She is a firecracker of a girl. The things that I have seen said about her, the pictures that I have seen, she had a lot of personality, a lot of spunk, and everyone absolutely loved her. She had a great group of friends at the private school that she attended for a majority of her high school education. However, she ended up switching to a public school for her senior year, and that's kind of when things in her life started to shift. The summer before her senior year, she worked really hard to get a job at the Foot Locker, but along with switching to public school, her parents think this also caused a very huge change in Ebby. Her parents noticed that she was picking a lot of fights with them. They started finding out that she was lying about a lot of the places that she was going and a lot of the things that she was doing. She skipped school a couple of times, grades started slipping, everything really just kind of started slipping. She had a great relationship with her family, and while she had always been independent, something kind of changed. Despite her change in behavior, her parents really just chalked it up to her being a teenager. We all go through those rebellious stages, we all get new friends and start to act a little bit differently. They figured that's really just what was going on. A close friend of hers from the private school named Danielle started becoming very concerned about her behaviors. She was worried about some of the people she was hanging out with, some of the situations that she was putting herself in. Danielle kept having to tell her, please don't do that, that's dangerous, or please don't hang out with that person, they're dangerous, that activity is not okay, that's not all right, you might get hurt, you might get in trouble. She really felt like she was having to instill in Ebby's brain that she was making a lot of very threatening decisions. She finally decided she wanted to move out of her parents' house. She was still a senior in high school, but she was also 18 years old. She had always been extremely independent. She'd always done a lot on her own. So from what I know, her parents didn't really argue against this. They just kind of let her go and do her thing. However, she didn't really seem to have much of a plan. She bounced around from her grandparents' house to her brother's house to her friend's house. She stayed the night with Danielle just a few nights before she went missing. She kind of was just all over the place. To me, it sounds like she was just in one of those rebellious stages of wanting to be able to do whatever she wanted, whenever she wanted, so she wanted out of her parents' house. That's just the vibe that I get from that. And according to her parents, the last place she finally ended up was at her brother's house. Then came the weekend that Ebby unfortunately went missing. The weekend Ebby went missing was a disastrous chain of events. On Friday night, Ebby had apparently been assaulted sexually at a party she was at. That next Saturday at around 8 p.m. she called her stepfather, who was at dinner with her mother, and asked if he would go to the police station with her to report the incident. She said she didn't want to go alone, and she didn't really give him much details other than that she was assaulted, she felt forced into it. One of them had recorded it the entire time, and the names of the 4 men that were involved. Earlier that day, she had texted a friend and informed him of what had happened at the party. She told him how upset she was. She even said she was planning on killing herself. I can't fully remember if she said she had been drinking or not, but I know that she smoked marijuana that night, and one thing led to another, and she said she felt horrible. It was just a horrible thing for this young woman to go through. So she was currently staying at her grandparents' house, and that night after she got off the phone with her stepfather, she told her grandparents she was going to meet him and then she would be back. However, never officially made plans of when or where to meet. It was just sort of a, we need to do this, I'll probably contact you tomorrow sort of a situation, and she never ended up coming back. The next day, on Sunday, all day, no one could really get in touch with her. Her brother hadn't seen her all day at the house. Her brother hadn't spoken to her. He tried calling her multiple times. She wouldn't answer her phone. And then finally, later on in the day, she answered one of his phone calls. And this is the last time anyone would ever speak to Ebby. He immediately asked Ebby where she was, and her response was, "I'm in the car right outside of your house." So obviously he ran to check, but she wasn't there. So he asked again, "Ebby, where are you?" And at this point he realized that she seemed very out of it, disoriented, lost, and she basically confirmed that by saying that she was very messed up. Now, drugs, alcohol, no idea, but he said he had never heard her like that in her entire life. She said she knew she was in her car, but she didn't know where she was or who she was with, and then the phone call ended and Ebby never picked up her phone again. This obviously sent him into an absolute panic, so he called the police department, reported this incident, said there's something very wrong here. She is missing. She's never acted like this. Please, this is her car, her description, everything. Please go try to find her. However, police immediately informed him he would have to wait about 12 hours. The parents at first hadn't been very concerned when she didn't contact them back. She had been having a few issues at home previously. She was just struggling kind of all around. Struggling with herself, struggling with figuring out how to transition, I guess, into a public school. And her parents were butting heads, so they really didn't think much of it at first. However, when they still couldn't get in touch with Ebby for a few hours afterwards, everyone panicked. They started searching parks, parking lots, all the areas that Ebby frequented in hopes of finding her, and they couldn't find her anywhere. They called her repeatedly, texted her repeatedly, and still absolutely nothing. Finally, when the 12 hours were up and they officially could file a report, a police officer came and told them some pretty devastating news. He informed the family that since she was 18 years old and she had officially moved out on her own, that she would more than likely be labeled as a runaway, despite their knowledge that this was not like Ebby at all, and something was very, very wrong according to the last time her brother spoke to her. The officer told them that his family had gone through a very similar situation and it did not end well. Their child was labeled a runaway. I'm guessing their child was either not found or was found deceased. I'm not 100% sure, but this pretty much scared the absolute crap out of Ebby's family. After bouncing around from department to department on the phone, they couldn't figure out who on earth was supposed to help them, who would take their case, who would try to find her. One department said they couldn't do this, said they wouldn't do that. They kept being transferred over and over again, and when they finally were transferred to the right person, they were just told that the person that would handle the case was out of town and wouldn't be able to help them for a while. They immediately went down to the police station infuriated and demanded help from anyone, and that's when they were pretty much swarmed by every police officer in the station, barking questions at them, just coming at them from all angles, writing things down in their notepads, but yet no one would even say their name, comfort them, really listen to what they were saying. And then one police officer finally said, "I'm handling the case. This is how we're going to move forward." He told Ebby's parents to not contact the media, which is an instant red flag to me. I don't care if it's a runaway, I don't care what you think happened. Media is one of the largest ways you can bring someone that is missing home. If you run away and people still don't know where you are still technically missing. And for some reason, this officer did not want them to talk to media. Ebby's mom, Laurie, is a hairstylist, so she knows a ton of people, talks to a ton of people. It's the industry I've been in, it's the industry my husband is in. You talk to everyone and you know everyone. So she used that to her advantage and she started calling everyone she possibly could. The one thing that she did find was that Ebby had been hanging out with a group of friends that was very questionable. Her older friends didn't know much about them, but they just knew that Ebby acted differently, and a lot of her friends were very concerned, including Danielle, the one friend that I talked about earlier on in the video. However, at the time, this really didn't help them very much. Her car description was given to the police, and everyone should have been on the lookout for Ebby. However, she was classified as a runaway, so no one was actually looking. She was the type of person that was obsessed with her social media. She had an Instagram, a Tumblr, a Twitter, a Snapchat, everything possible. This girl had it, and she was completely silent on all of them, which really scared her parents. Her mother gave in and finally went to the media despite what the officer said to her, and plastered Ebby's poster everywhere she possibly could in hopes that someone would see it, or maybe she would see it and she would be returned home to her family. Almost a week went by with absolutely no information and seemingly no help from police at all. But the following Friday, 5 days after she disappeared, Ebby's father got a phone call. They had found an abandoned car in a park, and they weren't sure if it was Ebby's. Now, this was infuriating for the parents because her name was on the title. If they just ran her license plate, they would automatically know it was her car. They created this big ordeal and made Ebby's brother and father come out to confirm it was her vehicle. And when they got there, they were able to confirm that the car was Ebby's, but Ebby was nowhere to be found. Ebby's car was found in a park only 4 miles away from their home, and she had left absolutely everything inside of it. The state of the vehicle is chilling to me to hear. The car had literally been left running long enough for it to completely run out of gas, completely kill the battery. The car just sat running for an extended period of time. Everything she owned was still in the car. Her contacts were in the car. Her makeup that she spent all of her money on was still in the car. Her keys, her phone, everything important to her was inside of the vehicle still. To make matters worse, the car had actually been reported to the police multiple times that week by neighbors, and absolutely no action was taken every time it was reported. There was even a security guard that saw it that next Monday after she went missing and that next Tuesday, and both times he called, to which he was told they would come out and check, but they never came. He then called a few times later on in the week, and they said they would be out there. He waited about 2 hours. No one came yet again. And then finally, I guess on that Friday that it was found, a neighbor called and said, "Something is wrong. I demand you to come out here." And finally someone showed up. So the car had been sitting there the whole entire time, up to a day after the last time she was spoken to, and the police refused to come and check it out. After confirming it was in fact Ebby's car, police said that they used a bloodhound to try and locate Ebby, searched all around the area. But so far the police department hadn't been the most truthful, hadn't been the most helpful, so to this day, Laurie, Ebby's mom, still doesn't think they actually did it. This is when the family's relationship with the police department really started to decline, and it was not due to the family. Ebby's mother asked police if they would get footage from a Walmart that was right down the road. I think it was less than a mile away from where the car was found. It was in a residential area, so there wasn't a lot around except for houses, and the closest thing she could have driven to grab a drink or go inside and do something would have been this Walmart. When she asked the sergeant if he would get this footage, he said it was too much footage to go through, and he wouldn't do it. Laurie went in with her friend and they were like, "Look, we will do it. We will look through it. It is important. If she was seen here with someone, this could possibly be the last footage seen of her." And still, he refused to do it. The police finally got a subpoena to check her pings on her phone. This is where the police department really started to fail. It took them about 2 weeks to get the subpoena, which should have taken less than half that amount of time. And then when they finally got it, they ended up pinging the wrong number, which then led them to believe that the last place Ebby's phone pinged was in the middle of a field about 45 minutes away from their town, in the middle of nowhere. Now, where they really failed is they pinged it a second time and used the correct number that time, only to find that the last time the cell phone pinged was when she was in the park in her vehicle talking to her brother. However, they did not inform the parents of this, so the parents ended up going out to this secluded location, expecting probably to find their daughter's body in the middle of a field. I cannot imagine how nerve-wracking that had to have been. And all for absolutely nothing. That's when law enforcement again made another huge mistake. The cell phone provider was using a different time than what the police were using, and they didn't really think to double check everything. When police were asking questions to really nail down a timeline based on phone records and their wrong time they were using, they started accusing the parents of lying to them, because obviously the parents are going off their time. The parents are going off the phone bill's time, but since the police decided to be on a totally different planet, they were seeing something totally different, which was meaning inconsistencies, which then led them to accuse the parents of murder, specifically the stepfather. They ended up putting him in an interrogation room for 3.5 hours, screaming at him. They said, "You're a murderer, you did this to your stepdaughter, how could you do that?" Pounded this poor man over and over again, accusing him of murdering his stepdaughter. And then once they were done with him, they weren't done fully, and then moved on to Laurie, her mother, and said, "Why would you cover for him? Why would you lie for him? Why would you let your husband murder your daughter?" I mean, it was a disaster. And all of these assumptions on their own mistake. Every single one of these assumptions, this idea that they had that the stepfather murdered her, was based on them getting a timeline wrong and refusing to double check anything. So all of their investigative efforts were pretty much spent on the parents and the family, and they didn't really have a lot of information towards them other than their own faulty timeline that they created. So you would think that the first place to be checked would be with the boys that were accused of sexually assaulting her just 2 nights before she disappeared. However, that wasn't the case. Like I said, Ebby had given the names of these young men to her stepfather, so he was then able to give them to the police, even though she wasn't there to do it herself. And the police didn't even really question them properly. Asked each one if they could take their phones. Every single one said no. And they just asked them basic questions, and all 4 of them were completely dismissed. This pretty much left police with nothing. I'm pretty sure at this point she was still considered just a runaway. Her case was not being taken seriously. They said she was a runaway, yet they were trying to accuse the parents of murder. It just was one giant mess and an absolute nightmare for Ebby's parents, because no matter what they tried, nobody was listening. Ebby's mother had to start her own investigation, basically, and she went to everyone she possibly could and was even contacted by many nonprofit organizations with horrific pictures of body parts, post-mortem photos, all of women who had been a victim of sex trafficking and other incidents, asking if it was her daughter. I can only imagine what getting an email with that sort of information would feel like. There was even a point in time where one of the victims had on a shoe that was identical to one that Ebby had, and her mother, her heart sank. She was having to do everything on her own, and it was a terrifying process to go through. Ebby's mother went to the police to tell them that it was very possible she was put into a sex trafficking ring. The police completely denied it. They said that sex trafficking wasn't really even a thing, that everyone who claimed to be in sex trafficking was really just a prostitute choosing that sort of lifestyle. They pretty much ignored that there was an issue, and even went as far as to say that there weren't even any gangs in Little Rock. They basically just were very closed-minded, and any sort of idea that Ebby's mother had, they shut down and claimed that they kept it tight-knit there and none of that stuff happened, and that's not possible, when in reality we are surrounded by this stuff no matter how safe we really think we are. Someone thought to be Ebby was even spotted by an ambulance driver in Memphis, and Ebby's mother immediately called the police department to have them check it out, and unfortunately was informed by them that they didn't work on the weekends and they wouldn't do anything about it. So there went yet another chance of possibly getting Ebby back home that the police just messed up. Little Rock Police Department also didn't have the means to get into Ebby's phone. They didn't have the proper IT department, the proper knowledge, so Ebby's mother was eventually forced to bring in her own person. She hired her own guy, found the best person she possibly could, and finally, after arguing with many different detectives and people in the police department, they allowed it and the ball kind of started rolling. One thing that this man did was change the password on, I think, one or a couple of her sites that she frequented on. I couldn't find perfect information on this, so I am not 100% sure. Either someone had been trying to get into her account or they changed it to see if someone would try to get into her account. I'm not 100% positive. I can't confirm which one it was, but he ended up changing the password to her social media accounts because of this. And this pissed off the police department like no other, and they shut the entire thing down. They told Ebby's mother and this man that they were interfering with the ongoing investigation, and if she tried to involve herself in the investigation again, they would throw her in jail. Their exact words. So basically, he did something that they weren't quite fond of, that made them feel less in control, and out of stomping their feet over territorial issues, they decided to threaten Ebby's mother. She was just trying to do whatever she could to find her daughter. He completely dismissed all the information that this man had gathered, made him feel like a total moron, discredited all of his work, and basically started from square one yet again. They refused to answer Ebby's mom's phone calls, emails, anything. They would have no contact with her. They would very rarely contact her with very vague information about the case. Obviously, like I said, she couldn't go down to the police department because they would have thrown her in jail. Imagine not knowing where your daughter is, having your husband accused of your daughter's murder that they're saying didn't actually happen because she's a runaway, and then being told that you are no longer allowed to be a part of your own investigation in the search for your daughter. I cannot even imagine some of the things that this woman has gone through. 4 months after Ebby went missing, they finally decided to interview this security guard. The security guard who found the car, reported the car multiple times, and they actually found out he had dash cam footage this entire time. This security guard had actually kicked Ebby and another person out multiple times of this park. He said on Crime Watch Daily that he saw her with a man a handful of times, 2 men sometimes, and they would be sitting in the back of her car or hanging out, and after hours, obviously, he would have to kick them out. So he had actually seen Ebby in there the days leading up to her disappearance. So he'd take his dash cam footage at the end of the night and download it to his computer. Unfortunately, since they waited 4 months to collect the footage, they didn't even ask this man if he had any footage, it all was lost when his computer crashed. So it was like this case was just taking one hit after another. At this point, they lost any information that could have been on the phones of the 4 young men that assaulted Ebby. When they decided to not legally take it, a couple officers have stepped up since and said that they had plenty of probable cause. They could have just taken the phones, gotten warrants for it, but that would have taken too much time. They lost all the footage from Walmart because Walmart deletes everything after a certain amount of time. So they lost that possible footage that could have had Ebby on it. They didn't properly investigate into the security guard who also had footage. 6 separate devices that could have had information on them that the police literally let slip through their fingers. At this point, they were still 100% convinced that Ebby's stepfather had something to do with her disappearance, to the point where they were texting Ebby's mother about it, saying things like, "Why would you cover it up for him? You're choosing to stay with an abusive husband. Your husband killed your daughter and you're still with him." Like disgusting, completely inappropriate messages, and they would send these things late at night, inappropriate times. But it's like the whole department was kind of in on this and just allowing it. So there was really nothing they could do. And Ebby's mother and stepfather were so scared to overstep any boundaries and call too many people out because that could mean their daughter would never be found. There was already so little happening that they didn't want to jeopardize completely ruining the whole entire case. Finally, things started looking up because 8 months after Ebby's disappearance, an outsider came in that could really look at the information. I'm not 100% sure who this outsider was, but it was someone who had a lot of say in the police department. He took all of the information from the private investigators working on Ebby's case and compared it to all of the files that the police department had from Ebby's case, and there was something very, very wrong. None of the information matched, and that's when they realized that the sergeant that had been on the case the entire time, the one harassing and refusing to do things, had falsified multiple documents and had never actually investigated essentially anything. He claimed to do interviews that he never actually did. He claimed to take in evidence that he never actually did. He basically lied his way through the past 8 months and never tried to find Ebby a single time. Thankfully, he was completely taken off the case, and the case was given to a new detective and was also given to the homicide squad in Little Rock. The homicide squad ensured them that they were going to do everything they possibly could to rework this entire case. And when they started going through the files, they were in absolute disbelief at how much information was completely ruined. There's only so much at this point that they could go back and rework and re-go through because nothing was originally taken, and all of those things are now lost. However, despite all of this loss of information, a bunch of new doors and potential people that would help and resources were now available to the family and to the homicide squad. I was watching the Vanished podcast on this, which I will have linked down below. I learned something very interesting that I didn't know and that I think is so important for you guys to know. There is something called Suzanne's Law, which means someone that's not quite in the Amber Alert territory or that could be put on the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children because of their age. There's something that can change that. Suzanne's Law basically allows people the ages of 18, 19, and 20 to be put on the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. I'm not exactly sure what the requirements are, but Ebby met them and she was immediately put onto the database, which is absolutely huge for her case. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children was now able to offer a ton of different resources, a ton of different areas where they could help. They helped start this giant search at the park where she went missing. Unfortunately, since it was 8 months later, they turned up nothing. As of now, something kind of huge happened in the case. TJ Ward is a private investigator, and you might recognize that name from my Natalie Holloway case. He was the private investigator that worked her case. He's the one that you saw working it on the Oxygen series, and he has officially decided to take Ebby's case. He says that he already has one thing that he really wants to pursue. There's one clue that he is just zeroing in on. He went out to where the car was found and went through the information of what was inside the car, and there's something in that bit of information that he said is making him raise his eyebrows, so I feel like he already has a couple of ideas. But everyone has their own ideas, and that's what I'm going to get into now, which is the theories. The first theory and the largest theory, and from what I've seen on her Facebook page, the theory that her mother believes is that she was sold into sex trafficking. I've watched the Crime Watch Daily episodes on Ebby Steppach, and some interesting information is revealed in those. The security guard specifically remembered Ebby being with 2 men at the park when he saw her. One of the men that was with her every time he was able to identify in a picture. The man that he identified is known to be involved in sex trafficking. At the time he identified it, this man had just been put into jail on related charges. However, I do want to say none of that has been confirmed, and the way that Crime Watch Daily kind of presented the pictures and the information was very suggestive, so a lot of people are not happy with the way they handled that. They think it was kind of forced onto the security guard. They didn't really add any extra faces in there. It was just handled very differently. So take that for what you will. So we know that she had planned on reporting the sexual assault, and then the last time anyone talked to her, she was messed up on either drugs or alcohol. However, she never got around to meeting up with her stepfather. Now, we don't really know if that was a decision she made or if she was planning on doing it and something kind of happened in between there. However, she did tell her grandparents she was going to meet him as she left the house. But she lied about where she was going frequently, so again, we can't really put a lot into that. It's very possible she might have changed her mind on reporting the sexual assault. A lot of the times, sexual assault victims have a period where they feel guilty. They feel like they did something wrong, that they asked for, that they deserved it. It's a really gross feeling for these people to experience, and it's unfortunately quite common. It's also possible that she might have started using drugs in order to cope with those emotions. That's another thing that's not too far-fetched. Her mother, however, does not think at all that she was involved in any sort of drugs. I do know from the text messages that she had smoked marijuana the night of the party, so we can at least say that she has smoked marijuana, but for harder drugs, it's kind of questionable. So I don't want to completely rule that theory out. Usually with human trafficking, sex trafficking, people are followed in large stores such as Walmart right down the road, or big shopping centers, scoped out at gas stations, at schools, and then they are followed. And usually they are drugged in some sort of way, or they are just snatched and taken into a car and driven off real quick. That's my only issue I have so far with this story. If she was taken by someone and drugged to be forced into some sort of sex trafficking, I don't see how the person doing that would have allowed her to answer her phone. Could have given them away immediately. She could have said where she was. I don't see how they would have allowed her to answer that after already being drugged, which would probably mean she was already being held prisoner by them. However, if some of the young men that she had befriended or someone she worked with, I'm not sure if those friends that she was partying with were from school or from work, if they had any sort of ties to the human trafficking ring, it's very possible they had something to do with it. They easily could have convinced her to use some sort of drug because, hey, they're just friends, they're just hanging out. And before she knew it, she could have been extremely messed up on something. However, again, I still feel like even them being friends, I don't see why they would have allowed her to answer her phone. Also, she had been in this park days before, so it was very likely someone could have been watching her. There was a playground at this park, so someone also could have been scoping out the area to grab children. So it's not that far-fetched that it was a stranger, except for the whole drugging aspect of the story. Again, she was also seen at this park with friends. If it was the people she was with that possibly had something to do with it, I find that odd as well, because the security guard kicked them out multiple times. So whoever was there with her knew there was a security guard, and I highly doubt they would be willing to try much there knowing there was someone who could possibly catch them. However, it's also possible she left somewhere that Saturday night, maybe to confront some of these people, or maybe to just go somewhere else, and she was snatched Saturday night and not on Sunday like we think, and they were using that park for a place for her to provide her services. However, again, I don't find that very likely because her car was with her, and I doubt they would allow her to have that. She had just been sexually assaulted, so her alert was probably on high for strangers. So to me, that says it is 100 times more likely that it was someone she knew that took her, if sex trafficking is what happened. Then you look at how her car was left. It was literally just running until it ran out of gas. So did she get out of her car to talk to a stranger that just so happened to snatch her? But again, why would she have been in her car where her phone was, drugged up, if that happened outside of her car? You guys get what I'm saying. None of this really adds up to a perfect typical abduction for human trafficking, but it has a lot of potential for it, just with someone she was probably very comfortable with. The security guard said that he saw her with men, and a couple of times they were sitting in the back seat. It's very possible that her and whoever this man was were sitting in the back seat, maybe smoking marijuana. Maybe this person gained her trust over a couple of days at this park and then laced it with something or slipped something else to her, and that's why she was just laying in her car on her phone talking to her brother. Maybe he was trying to situate other things before coming back to get her. I don't know, it's very strange. The next theory is that she was taken and is just being held captive. Just like we said with the human trafficking case, someone easily could have watched her at the park over the past couple of days. The security guard noticed that she was there multiple times, so if anyone else was scoping out the area, it's very possible someone noticed her habits and behaviors of going back there and just waited for her and took her. Just instead of being thrown into a sex ring, she was just held captive. I don't really know what to think about this theory. I don't really know what the motive would be, but I do definitely think it's likely. The next theory is that someone took her and then killed her. Like we know, she was assaulted just a few nights before, and that is enough to ruin someone's life. Whoever was the attacker, their life, if it was reported, could be completely changed forever. I mean, that's a permanent record, that's jail time, that is being on a sex offender list for the rest of your life. That changes what jobs you can have, how far away from schools you can live. It literally destroys your life afterwards. She was going to report it, so what if these attackers didn't like that idea very much? Did she maybe confront them and say, hey, I'm reporting what you did? Maybe she was like, hey, delete the footage and I won't report this. And they realized they were screwed and kind of took things a little bit too far. I just find it way too coincidental that right after this happens, right after she says she's going to report it, she suddenly goes missing. 4 people came together to sexually assault her and record it. They had planned that. So I don't think planning on either finding her or cornering her and then possibly killing her, or maybe they didn't ever plan that, but it just escalated, that doesn't seem too far-fetched to me. They schemed once before, they could scheme again. Maybe who she was with at the park she thought was a friend, but this person was friends with the people who had attacked her and was just letting them in on where she would be. Maybe she was sitting in her car with it on, waiting for her friend to show up, and instead someone else showed up, maybe one of her attackers, maybe all 4. But that still wouldn't really explain how she ended up on some sort of drugs and able to answer her brother's phone call. I don't know, I feel like every theory that we go into, part of it fits, but then there's a huge part of it that makes it seem almost impossible. I have a huge issue with the person that was with her in the park, because as far as I know, they did not come forward. This person was seen with her at the park multiple times right before she went missing. Why haven't they come forward unless they are guilty of something? They knew something, they did something, they planned something, they helped with something. That is the one thing that keeps tripping me up in all of these theories. There's someone out there who was with her for multiple days and for some reason won't come forward about it. On the other hand, though, it could have been a total stranger that maybe stumbled across her and decided to attack her for some unknown reason. I don't know, maybe she was just a victim of chance. Like we said before, maybe she was coping with her emotions and what just happened to her by using drugs and or alcohol, and she was in a very impaired state and the wrong person stumbled across her. There's just no telling. The other theory is that she possibly committed suicide. After all, she did send this in a text message to a friend, but I feel like she just kind of left her car in a place not ideal for her to just walk off somewhere and then not be found. It was a residential neighborhood. It was right off of a highway, pretty much close to a big Walmart shopping center. So even though they haven't done very extensive searches because there was such a lack in proper police involvement at first, I feel like at this point she probably would be found if that was the case. Last theory is that she just ran away. After all, she'd been having some sort of struggles at home to the point where she decided to move out. She was not showing up to school. She had even told her friend Danielle at one point, a couple of days before she disappeared, that there was some sort of drama going on at school. So she could have been struggling with something and just wanted to get away. Maybe she was sitting there trying to contemplate what she wanted to do. Maybe she was under the influence of drugs again because of the stress she was under and what she was dealing with. And that's why she sounded like that on the phone with her brother. And she lied saying she was outside to get him to calm down and then had to make something up real quick. But this theory just doesn't seem very likely to me, especially because of the things she left behind in her vehicle. She left behind contacts, she left behind things that you wouldn't just suddenly not need anymore had you decided to get a new identity. Your vision's not all of a sudden fixed because you decide you want to change who you are and run away. So she left things behind that were very important to her and necessary, and something she would not be able to easily regain on her own as an 18-year-old young woman. So I don't think the likelihood of her just running off is that high. I think TJ Ward's work on the Natalee Holloway case was absolutely outstanding. He followed so many different things. He thought of so many different possibilities. So I have full faith he's going to do amazing on this case. I know that they are doing everything they possibly can. I am just so worried about all the information that they lost, because all of that information was absolutely crucial to figuring out what happened to her. I am so incredibly worried that the only thing they have left is someone coming forward, and that is why I am making this video. Come forward if you have any bit of information. You know, someone was at that party. Someone was at that party. Someone knows the young man that attacked her. Someone was with her in the park multiple days before she disappeared. People, and more than just one person, multiple people know something, and they are choosing to not come forward. And that's almost what worries me the most, because that to me says guilt and scared of repercussions, and that makes me worried for whatever happened to her. I am hoping she is found safe and sound. I am hoping this all turns out well. I'm just hoping her mother gets answers. I am hoping that she is found safe and sound. She has siblings. She's got people who care about her. She has friends, and she's out there somewhere. It's just getting to her. If you have any information on her, if you have seen her, if you know anything, contact any of the numbers that I have listed down below. Don't forget, if you want to help contribute to her GoFundMe, you can purchase any of my merchandise that I have linked down below as well. I just want to say thank you for taking the time to watch this incredibly long video. I know this one was quite a doozy. I apologize, but every little bit of information counts, and I'm glad you stuck through all the way. Please share this video or just share her story to everyone that you possibly know. You never know who knows something, and you never know what might change a case. And on that note, I'm going to go ahead and head out, guys. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.